There is more than one South Africa. There is the South Africa of the cities and towns. And then there is traditional South Africa, the areas formerly called homelands, like most of the northern province, where the Human Rights Violations Committee sat this week.
In Khamatlala, in 1979, the former government people, they came there to come and take our animals. They took donkeys and goats and cattle. After that, only after 2 weeks, they came back to come and burn our huts. They burned our huts and all the property inside. Everything which was inside the house was burnt. There's nothing which was left. My father and others were assaulted, and the reason was because of the apartheid government, and they were members of the African National Congress. They were assaulted by the people of the traditional chiefs. They were sent by our chief called Matlala.
Sidwell Ramutla's story shows that rural South Africa was not untouched by apartheid-inspired conflict and violence. Khamatlala in the northern province, ruled at the time by Ramudike's Lebowa government, witnessed intense feuding between anti-apartheid villagers and traditional chiefs in support of the South African regime. By the late 70s and 80s, the feud developed a hard, ugly edge. The main conflict was over chieftaincy. Chief Ben Kaume Matlala, a member of the Lebowa government, angered by the lack of support by the Khamatlala community, went on the attack. The result? Forced relocations, confiscations of cattle, burnt houses, and inevitably, mutilation and death. Rosina Chola lost her 6-month-old granddaughter in such an attack.
What happened in my house. I was in my house with my granddaughter and her mother. When they came by storm. Like they told us to leave. And we went with them. We found a car was full of people. And we wanted to hear why we were being called, because they didn't tell us when they took us at home. And then they chopped my granddaughter, and we heard my granddaughter crying.
I was in the field with my animals, with the cows under a tree. While I was sitting there, relaxing, and the cows were grazing, I just saw something like a car, and when I looked at it, I saw a group of people. I started to run away. I tried to, but they beat me, and the others were screaming at me, shouting, and they fetched me back. They beat me again, and I ran away. I ran to the field, and I never came back. And at the same time, the houses were burned.
They assaulted him. They removed his brain. They removed his eyes, and was taken to Kalafong Hospital in 1980. This feud started at Khamatlala. When he came back from Kalafong, he stayed for 2 years. He was paralyzed. He could not walk. He could not eat. He could not do anything.
Witchcraft is a particularly serious problem in the Northern Province. The widow and son of Northern Transvaal UDF leader Peter Nchabaleng testified about his death in police detention in 1986. But Peter Nchabaleng was far more than just a political leader in Sekhukhune land. He was also an outspoken critic of witch-burning practices. He and his sons played a significant role in trying to curb witch hunting by the youth, and this, according to his wife and son, made him enemies beyond the South African police. But what role did witchcraft really play in this province during the struggle years, and how did witchcraft beliefs influence the politics at the time? Some say it was politics, specifically youth politics, that changed the age-old practices linked to witchcraft in the area.
One may ask the question, why is it that from the 1980s, young people began to be actively involved in violence concerning witchcraft? It was largely political. There were people who wanted to see the country ungovernable. So they used young people to do what they wanted to see accomplished.
And therefore each one fighting for political turf looked for excuses where they can degrade others or destroy others. And therefore one of the object they could use was witchcraft, you see. But in reality, they were fighting for political turf. And most of them claimed to be ANC, others claimed to be PEC. But they did things that ANC was against, like necklacing.
Death by burning was not widespread in the province before the 80s. Traditional methods of dealing with witches rarely included killing them. Banishment from villages was the most common form of punishment. But in the rare cases where killing did take place, witches were drowned or thrown down ravines. So why this deviation from the traditional ways during the turbulent years of the struggle?
The problem was the communities, the people themselves felt they've been oppressed by the apartheid government. At the same time, when they go back to their place of living, they are now under threat from the witches. So you can see that now in the course of that struggle, so people have two opponents. And now it became clear that they need to crush all these opponents. So it happened, it might be a coincidence that this thing of witch hunting became very rife maybe late around the 80s, when I think we had this kind of state of emergencies, riot at schools and so on. But basically it became more popular because of the extent of unity amongst the youth in our provinces.
The burning of witches went hand in hand with the necklacing in the PWV in the Gauteng regions. People in the Gauteng were necklaced because the authorities were doing nothing, you see, when maybe those perpetrators were brought in to court. I think even it's the same with witchcraft. You find that the courts cannot even come with a description on how to deal with those cases. So people are told not to believe in those things.
And you find that with people knowing that it's possible to burn a person, I mean, that kind of coverage developed psychologically into the mind of other people, whereby people felt now it's a good strategy, or it's a more popular strategy to burn your enemy. And in these rural areas, most of the enemies were not sellouts, but were the alleged witches.
But what precisely is a witch, and what do they do that people fear them so?
Although we're speaking of one province here, each area has got a large number of certain ethnic groups. If you take in the Northern Sotho-speaking people, many people were accused of having caused lightning. Whereas if you go to a place like to a place such as Venda, it was what I call perhaps the traditional witchcraft. In other words, somebody is accused of having killed a certain person through witchcraft. practices, not necessarily lightning. And then two, some areas of Venda also, adopted this issue of zombies. Now, it is mostly in northern Sotho-speaking areas where you find that the zombie issue played a very important role. But of course, then Western Venda and some parts of Guyana also fell into that category. In other words, very often if a person is wealthy, a person such as a farmer, people begin to ask the question, why is he doing so well in his farm? Who is working in his farm? So very often, out of jealous, somebody will spread the gossip that when he was passing there one night, he heard so many voices in the farm. And he said, those must have been zombies brought into the farm by the owner of the farm. And just because of that, the owner of the farm may be forced to flee from the area or may be killed if he's not lucky.
We talk of witchcraft, we don't even talk of wizardcraft. It's nothing like that. It's always witchcraft. And the victims in the north have been mostly women, old women.
More than 200 people have died at the hands of witch hunters in the northern province. Belief in witchcraft remains strong.
It is a methodological thing, I think. It's not different from religious belief, spiritual belief. Therefore, it is something that you cannot wish away within the community. It's going to be with us for a long time. It's a belief which you cannot prove. You don't have to prove, just like in religion. One does not have to prove that God exists or to prove that really Jesus died and rose up again. We only have, in the northern province, I think where it began to go wrong is when it was used for political purposes.